All right.
Yeah, the last one.
I call to order the WTA Board of Directors meeting for Thursday, May 7th, 2026. Vicki, may you please start the roll?
Yes, Buchanan.
Here.
And board member Cotton is absent. Hawkinson.
Here.
Fortice.
Here.
Montbach is currently absent. Lilyquist.
Here.
Mayor Lund is absent. Board member Ranstra is absent. Stewart.
Present.
Board member Ranstra is with us online. Thank you. And Stewart is here in Darwin.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes on any topic relevant to WTA. Is there anyone online who would like to unmute and address the board? Please do so now. Seeing none, is there anyone in person who would like to address the board? I almost said unmute. All right. D, closed session. The board will now meet in closed session for a collective bargaining update as allowed by RCW 42.30.144B, starting at 8:01. How much time do we need?
Let's say 5 minutes, Vanessa.
Okay, for 5 minutes until 8:06 a.m. Yeah. Right, I call the regular meeting back to order. Give everybody a second.
So right out. Okay.
Hi.
Yeah, cool.
All right.
Do we need a motion?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, I move that we approve the collective bargaining agreement that we have reviewed.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? All those in favor of approving the collective bargaining agreement, please say aye.
Aye.
Yeah. Any opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you so much, everyone. All right, item E, board action, consideration of authorization to order 2 hybrid buses. John.
Good morning, board. How's everybody?
Good, how are you?
That's bad. I am here this morning to request that the board of directors approve a purchase order and capital commitment for 2 40-foot hybrid electric buses from Gillig with a not to exceed project cost of $3.15 million. This amount includes funds for the required on-site inspection and biometric audit processes, spare parts, training, extended warranties, make-ready costs, and a 5% project contingency. The intent of this order is to use the Washington State DES contract 04824-01 upon receipt of DES pre-authorization. Do you want background section this time or not? No? Okay. Fiscal impact. WTA intends to use its awarded 2023 congressional earmarked funding, $2 million, to cover approximately 64% of eligible expenses. WTA also intends to use 1.142.5 of local match funds to cover the remaining costs. Funds will be obligated on the order date and budgeted and dispersed in 2028 and or 2029 upon delivery and acceptance of the buses. We had to leave it split across those 2 years because we don't have exact production timeline information from Gillig at this point.
I'll say for background on this, on the earmark component, if you may recall, we originally got the $2 million earmark. It was for electric buses with issues we've talked about with electric and also switching philosophies at the federal level. Electric was no longer possible and feasible. Kudos to Marine for getting the earmark switched to the hybrid. That Also means that we have to get the funds obligated by the close of this fiscal year, because while they switched the project title, that didn't elongate the time where we have to obligate it. So that's moved kind of quick to try to get these funds obligated. Just a little background.
I'll move, we approve the purchase of two 40-foot hybrid electric buses from Gillig.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Michael,
Just out of curiosity, are these hybrid buses basically like the uncold ones we bought 5 years ago, or are they improving or changing the model in any way?
There is a new model of engine coming out from Cummins that is supposed to be larger displacement and ideally higher horsepower output that should address the acceleration concerns that we have with those vehicles, if that's what you're referring to.
But the gas mileage impact is about the same or no change, or I hope.
So as a matter of fact, I believe
Bigger
Karen
sounds
actually have
healthier.
better numbers on the gas mileage. She has more of familiarity with those reports. I think she could probably provide better numbers for fuel mileage on the hybrids, especially considering the conversion from biodiesel or regular diesel to R99 recently.
Yeah, the gas mileage has gone down a little bit with the R99. And in comparison to the 2012 hybrids, the 2012 hybrids they get about 6.9 miles to the gallon. And the 2024s get about 5.7. That's what we're getting right now.
How do they compare to the diesel? Do you have that?
The diesels get about 5.4.
Just to add that a little bit, we are still playing around a little bit with the geofencing and the engine start stop features on those vehicles to try to maximize that efficiency though.
That gives you context of gas mileage.
any other questions? Further discussion? All right, all those in favor of authorizing the order of 2 hybrid buses, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much.
I will say, just up on Michael's, that the hybrid buses do require more of our fleet time of mechanics, because there's some issues with the new designs on Allison, and geofencing and some other things, start acceleration things that as they change, there's new problems that come up that take more time from our fleet mechanics folks to work on.
Did anyone have any other questions or any comments for me? No. All right, thank you very much. Did you want to say?
Item F, consent agenda.
Approval consent agenda?
Right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes. Item G, board discussion on the reserves policy.
Yeah, well, she's doing that. Yeah, I'll give a quick lead in. So at the March board workshop, we talked about reserve policy changes, and based on that discussion, there seemed to be an appetite to talk about our reserves kind of writ large in our approach, philosophical approach to reserves, as well as more of the details. So we thought we'd bring it back. We've got to build some space into this agenda so that we could have a discussion on it. It's not time constrained. We'll take that input and thinking and then come back with revisions later, but wanted to provide that space. So with that, hopefully I stuff the
Well, I'm
workshop.
not laughing at him, Michael's making notes already. My spacing maybe on the front page. Thank you. We're gonna go ahead and bring this and like Les said, we had this conversation at the March workshop, and it became a little bit muddy, I think, as we were talking about the 5307 money. So as we were working on developing the policy, maybe we should just talk about this. So right now, our current policy, which was updated and approved in 2019, has the 3 reserve funds, the operating, which we talked about in the past as being required by the state auditor. That's actually not accurate. It's an MRSC best practice to have 60 days of your budgeted expenses. Since that is in our policy, the auditors will look at that. So I think that's where that connection came. We have 90 days. Michael, you asked a question about what would the reserve look like if we anticipated a 20% decline in revenue? 60 days and a 20% decline to cover a year's worth of expenses are almost the same number. They're very close. So we can display that in the policy either way. In the draft policy, we do talk about it being able to sustain the 20% decline in revenue. And the revenue we looked at for that was sales tax and fares. So not grant revenue because that fluctuates on its own. The capital improvement reserve that we have now is for any long-term capital project that's not a rolling stock. That's at 2 years of the local cash. So the current budgeted year plus 1 year. Maybe that's too many years. We want to talk about that. Do we just need 1 year and potentially set a cap in the future for what capital will look like? We do have this 6-year capital plan that lays out what we think our anticipated projects and costs will be for the next 6 years. So we're planning for that. We may not be saving for that. And then the fleet reserve is for all of our rolling stock. And that is currently, we look at our stock, we figure out the life, and we put enough away to replace them when they come. That one's changing with the drawdown of the 5307, right? We're gonna draw down that money and then put an equal amount into the fleet reserve, because once we draw that money in advance, we don't have that money to rely on, although we keep getting grants, so that kind of distorts that a little. We have a lot of money in there right now for 2026 because we thought we would be getting about 27 million in those WTA funds. We're going to get about half of that this year because of timing. So currently we have $42.5 million in reserves. That will adjust down when we do the budget amendment. But what we wanted to talk about is, particularly I think the operating and the capital is the board comfortable with those levels? Do we want to talk about maybe going down to 60 days in operating and capital? Do we do the 1 year and maybe not 2? And just sort of the appetite of the board. I know, Scott, you had mentioned, do we want to tie up all this money in reserves where we might be able to use it to do some other things? The operating one, like we talked about, is really one that we kind of have to have. The other two are board policy reserves. So there's a lot of flexibility in those two, and actually in all of them. And we will be audited to what our policy is. So the board really can think about and talk about how much money we want to be setting aside, being prudent to ensure that we can fund and sustain our futures, but not constraining ourselves so much that maybe we're limiting what we can do in that present. Les, anything you want to add?
I'll just add one thing on the fleet reserve. The philosophy had been that the interest stays in that fund. We had proposed with the fleet reserve, because we were drawing down to 5307, that the interest off of that, and because it's large, that we take that interest and put it back into operational budget on that. So there's that. Yeah, that's it for.
And part of the philosophy on that was, right, we draw that money, so WTA is earning that interest versus we sitting with the FTA. Our future.
I'm just wondering, does that aspect there about giving the administration freedom to take the interest earnings and put them into operations, does that need to be in this policy, or that it's fine that it's not in the policy?
It is in the proposed policy on page 14. Number 2, where it talks about
I see it.
what we would do with the fleet reserve. So that is a change for us, but it gives us that flexibility.
The interest would stay in the other funds.
Correct.
It's just that.
Just the
one. Go because of that 5307.
The other piece of the new policy is what we had talked about with how much we have in like our daily checking account to pay for daily operations. We proposed earlier 10 million. Michael, you would ask what is really our average. It's about 5 million for monthly. So we're proposing to keep just 5 million in our daily checkbook. And then the difference between all of our cash and those 4 reserve funds is kind of what we talked about with the strategic reserve, where those are funds that can allow us to try some things that we need more than a year to evaluate the success. That's really the other pocket of money that we're talking.
And for today, we were just looking more for discussion as opposed to vote on anything, we'll bring back any provisions that come from certain concerns.
So I'm looking at page 21 of the packet that shows the reserve.
Yeah.
And then page 23 that outlines what that 41 million is in designated reserve. And I note that the fleet reserves went up 21 million.
Correct. So that was the anticipation of drawing down the 2 years at 5 years at 5307 money. We're not able to do that, so you will see in the quarter 2 report, we have adjusted that reserve. It's inflated in this report. It will be about 11 million when we come back.
But you're right, it highlights the amount.
Correct.
That's,
Yeah.
that's coming,
Correct.
from that 5307 decision. It highlights that.
So I guess okay, in the past, when we bought a bus, it was $1 million. Then we would get
85%.
from the federal government, we spent 15% of our own.
Correct.
And we went on with business, but we still reserved the whole million, even though we knew we were only gonna spend 15%, is that correct?
No, that's not correct. We would reserve just the difference,
Okay.
the local share. So just our.
And now we're reserving the whole thing because we have the money in our.
Right, we won't be getting that reimbursement from the FTA.
I wouldn't call it reserving.
Yeah, then it's not really, yeah.
I mean, sorry, Sean, I'm, nice speech, sorry.
I'm ready.
The graph on 21, so what Scott's highlighting is there's something kind of deceptive about these 5307 monies. It looks like it's in our reserves, but it's got,
It's earmarked.
it's got a fence around it. So I would almost like pick another beautiful color, yellow,
Separate it?
and call that basically reimbursement funds, because it's in no sense can it be transferred to any other of the reserves. Whereas the other reserves are still fungible.
And do we still have the 15% requirement, even though now that we've gotten the money?
No, we would have to pay the whole thing.
I understand, but can we pay for the whole bus? I mean, did the 15% requirement go away then?
It didn't, but the way we're using the money did, because we won't be applying for a grant at all.
I think we have to tag the dollars, say we take 15% of it from this part and 85% from this part.
Yeah.
So they're tagged.
So our new yellow section would be the 85% and the 15 would still be something separate.
It would be in the blue part.
Yeah. Because then I think we're starting to show what we really need to see.
Right. The other components to factor into that is, because then we're using technically entirely local dollars, it frees up where we can buy buses. So we can expand and look at other maybe more cheaper, because there's like European models that I'll say that some of our sister agencies buy that are, well, we can't do that, but by law, but there are some European models that King County is looking at that are significantly cheaper. We would have that option, whether we do it or not, it's a different story, but we'd have that option to examine. And then the other thing is grants. So we're not going to need to buy a 40-foot fixed route bus until early 2030s, 2030, 2031, 32, because of the grants funding. So, but we're still drawing down that 2307 money because we wanted to draw the interest off of that rather than let it sit in the FTA account. So as we're looking at this, we need to, in our fleet replacement plan, how do we want to make sure that we have enough in the early 2030s to be able to meet that. And then we have some of that money from 5307.
So, okay, so you guys know this vernacular, but 2307 and 5307, these are
Oh, those are
different.
the same.
Think you just
Did I say 2307? I'm sorry, 5307.
I thought there was a new one.
I thought I would just make it a little bit harder. It's not hard, no, okay. I might have confused things even more, sorry about that.
So an option we could do, let's just piggyback off of your the buses in 2030. They might say $10 million. since we have that situation of a 40-year rolling stock plan, we could just bring the 5307 money in and put it in cash and then just fund. So we would have 10 million in the fleet reserve for 2030. What we also want to be careful is if looking like we just have a bunch of cash that we're not doing anything with. So the reserves, we can really talk about what we're doing with that money. If it's sitting in undesignated, unrestricted, just daily cash, I think there can be a lot more questions about what are you doing with all of this money?
I agree. I think it's actually less transparent if we were to bring it in and remove the label. It's better. I would actually not call it reserves. I invented a new label. I called it 5307 holding.
Yeah.
We called it quasi grant money.
Yeah,
We can come up with.
Otherwise, people look and say, why are you sitting on cash? Why don't you use it? But if
Yep.
it's called holding and it's labeled yellow, I think that it's really clear that that's not money that we have freedom to do whatever we want with.
And that's very easy.
Yeah.
Clarification, can we draw down all the 5307 money before we use any of our fleet reserve? So we could buy, if there was enough money for 10 buses in there, we could fully buy 10 buses with the 5307 money and not use any other fleet reserve, like the
So the
15%.
15% is not part of it anymore.
That, I think that requirement has been nullified because we've drawn down all the money, so now we have all the money is ours anyway.
But we are planning based on the full cost of a bus. Yeah.
That's why would anybody not do it this way, or why weren't we doing it this way before? I'm drawing.
That's a good question. That's why we're looking at it now.
Okay, it's a good question. I think what I understand why we didn't do before with some other agencies, we're taking that down and then let it drift into using that money for operations. And then they wouldn't have the money to replace. Yeah, exactly. And so that's what we were talking about. Okay, we need to put a fence around those dollars to make sure we're not compromising that portion of it.
So there's some agencies that have very little fleet on the road. They ended up doing that and then they didn't have the revenue to buy the buses. So we want to be really careful about it.
To your point, it makes perfect sense if that's the risk, you can mitigate against that risk and then still take advantage of having that money drawn down. And as we saw before, the federal government can't take a long time. We cash flowed $20 million waiting for reimbursement on that. And so this would allow us not to be in that position going forward because we lost a couple $100,000 in interest by cash flowing that because the federal government was taking a long time paying.
It's just striking to me that the federal government would have rules that we have to buy American and rules that we have to do 15%. But if we just take their money, then all the rules fall on the table. That just seems crazy. That's not the government I'm aware of.
There are a lot of interesting rules that don't make a lot of logical sense.
Michael?
Just for discussion, even before I was on board, maybe the first time, long ago, I remember there were discussions. Scott, you must have been there, Jack Laus was there, complaining about how we were carrying what appeared to be too much money. I think we should try to set leaner and tighter reserves for a while, see if it actually gets us into trouble. I don't think it will get us into trouble. I think we were being too cautious. And so it looked like we were carrying more money than we did. I think we should try for a while with our eyes open and see if we get in trouble. I don't think we will.
If we could schedule as part of our updates each quarter, here's where the reserves are, so you can closely monitor.
I agree. And when I started down 17 years ago, that was one of the things when I came in the room. It's like we had 20 million in reserve, and then it's never been less than that.
Right. I mean, last year, right, it was 21 million, so you're right, it's very consistent.
And then, but I think, Michael, we have to be cautious too, because we're spending more than we're taking in. So I just want to have enough reserve that if that keeps happening, that we have a ramp to solve the problem with reserves till we get it figured.
we have an operating problem. The reserves is not the same as operating, and we need to have a different drawing for one problem and for the other.
I just don't wanna have the operating response, it's 90 days now, I'm comfortable with 90, I guess.
So you could leave it at 90, potentially keep 1 year in the capital reserve. And monitor that, or we could try operating at 60 days. But we could move them, around and see where we are. I think the challenge might be is we might not see a lot of movement every quarter. We're not really spending anything out of those reserves, so it may take a year to really analyze if it's a good move or not.
So my agreeing with you that let's do something with reserves, but my problem is anything we do with reserves probably involves expanding routes. And that exacerbates the operating problem. And
So I will say that,
if it were one-time money, we could spend it on buying something one time that would make us more efficient, so we could do, I just don't see one-time money.
We're working on some creative solutions that have the philosophy of one-time money for one-time things. But may have an operational flavor to get us through some issues that we'll talk about at the June workshop. So thinking along those lines of how do we be a little more aggressive with our reserves, but keeping with that philosophy of one-time money for one-time thing. So sorry that was cryptic, but I don't have all the risks and mitigation, all that thought through yet.
it reminds me of the jail discussion, sorry, came out a lot. Where some like they're concerned that if we go cheap on capital, it'll cost us too much operationally. It's sort of like the opposite and positive version of that. If there's capital one-time costs that will save us on operations, even though it's one time, our goal would be to smooth operations and remove inefficiencies, or I don't know, improve whatever needs improving.
Right. If I may, on the capital, we've had this philosophy of saving based on CIP and those kinds of things. Another option is just to put a floor on that, and then that would drive us on the CIP of like, okay, here's a max that we have on cap. This is non-rolling stock capital. But that would be another philosophy as opposed to letting the CIP drive how much is in the capital, which then can lead to a more fiscally unconstrained request. Do we put a cap on it that we know how much that's the maximum? And it would kind of flip that, because then you're doing capital based on how much money you have, as opposed to what are all those projects, and then having to try to whittle them down based on, because they're all good projects. So that's another philosophy. I'm not advocating for, but I just wanted to suggest another approach.
Right now, often what's in the CIP really ends up in the budget for the most part. So we could constrain it there, and then bringing the budget back to the board, we would be able to lay out what those things are also. And we're working really hard with looking ahead into the future. Like the roof on this building is 20 years old. It's a 40-year, but we want to start thinking about what are those big projects that we're going to need to do for state good repair, not just on vehicles, and get them laid out so we see what's coming down and save towards doing those. But you're right, it feels opposite, like the CIP is kind of driving it versus the constraints on our dollars.
I actually think CIP should drive it, because CIP reflects hopefully reality. What we'll actually think we want to build, what we actually think we have to repair, what we actually need to do. That's reality. And then it'll go backwards to the budget. Now you're required to keep this. You just wrote a check. You got to make sure you can cash it. So the fact that it does fluctuate with our plans, with reality, or suddenly we discover the roof needs replacing early, right? It should actually go backwards and drive our reserve. So I think actually having the CIP, even though it fluctuates, drive reserve is appropriate, because then reality really does force you to revise your plan anytime you have to revise your capital expectations. operations. So that's my fault.
I think we'll have to be careful and review ours, yeah. It could have some more wishes than needs, so we might need, and we're actually working on that right now. We have a meeting tomorrow, so we can talk about that philosophy.
And that's on staff. I was just proposing something that would be a little different for discussion purposes. And so getting that direction is great.
One opinion.
I'm here, very disagreeing.
If there's anybody online, sorry.
They should pop up,
Okay.
to the,
But you could just.
Is there anyone online who wants to contribute to the discussion? All right, just making sure we're not missing anybody.
So I guess with this discussion, we can bring back this proposed new policy in at another meeting. Sure. And then give you some time to review and think on it if there are changes.
We'll bring it back with a graphical representation. And so kind of what I heard is, just if you don't mind.
All the colors.
We'll show the 5307 money separately and call 307 folder or something in a separate color for the 80 to 85%, and we'll show would have been our share in a different color. Look at setting leaner and tighter reserve balances, monitor that, and then think about how the CIP drives it, and then just keep in mind that less reserves might equal an expectation of under service, and then we can kind of monitor this as we go.
Maybe we could bring that back, Jim, because it would dovetail well with some of these ideas we're working on that how do you use reserves for one-time expenses that may have an operational component to. So that discussion would dovetail well, because then I don't have to be so cryptic that we can actually talk about research.
Yeah, I guess my thing that I share the opinion of Scott. I don't want to spend this money on something that creates more, demand later. So I like having a healthy reserve. It makes me less nervous.
85% of our cost is labor. It's hard not to
Right, yeah.
do anything that doesn't involve labor.
Yeah, so essentially what I'm hearing is that the issue is spending it in a way that causes continuing operational costs that we wouldn't be able to sustain after that one-time expenditure. Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Thank you. I appreciate the discussion of this. I just think we can recap.
Sure.
All right, reports to the board. Shonda again.
Okay, so we'll be talking about the Q1 2026 report. There's a discussion in economic outlook. I won't read it to you. Assume you all have read it. Revenues were just a little bit under budget, but our sales tax did come in over $15,000. And it was about 3,000 over Q1 of last year. So that's really good. February receipts, I'm gonna love them right now. I think we're about 6.5%. It's May, February. It's 6.5% above Q1 2025, and all of the categories were up. So we're seeing a little uptick January and February. So we're gonna keep going on that. Same amount of days in February, so it's pretty comparable. And often January, February are just kind of weaker months, so this is good. Expenses under budget, about 1.4 million, and most categories are under budget. Salaries and benefits, we have had a lot of folks that are at the higher end of our pay scale. So that's part of the reason why we'll be able to absorb the contract increases. And then capital expenses, we had some things up earlier than we expected. So a lot of things we try to budget by the quarter, it will be completed. So kind of guessing, and sometimes we miss. Consumer confidence, not great of what's going on in the world. Inflation, 3.1%. in March of 26. Unemployment, 5% January, up 0.4 for January 25. Housing market, rising inventory, slower sales, although the price is still relatively high. Real estate market, lots of vacancies in downtown Bellingham. They posted an article recently in the Herald that talked about that. And what the city's looking at trying to do. Federal Reserve held the interest rates steady. So all of those things can be weakening the consumer confidence. So we'll just be monitoring what spending looks like. The war, Iran doesn't help. Fuel costs, we're seeing fuel costs up about 25% from Q1 of last year. So we're just going to keep monitoring these, but it can come, like Michael, you said, if we're looking at keeping things kind of tidy with operating expenses and revenue. Page 18 are the speedometers, and I wanted to ask, do these still provide value to folks? I'm really reading feedback on this report that you think you need more or less of. They're not difficult to put together. And we started this a number of years ago for a visual with our targets. If you still like those, we'll continue to include them. And then pages 19 and 20 really have graphical representations of sales tax annually by quarter, and then you can see our revenues and expenses. Sales tax came in at 9.2 million, salaries and wages at 9.8. So we were really close with covering salaries and benefits with sales tax. Fuel, again, a little bit over budget because of 22,000 with the increases that we're having. Page 21 is the graphical of the cash and designated reserves. We kind of talked about what that will look like coming forward in Q2. And then we've got just the income statement and the balance sheet. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Any things that you'd like to see different report here.
On page 21, I liked it when you had the 4 colors instead of 2.
Okay, perfect.
Or maybe
So we'll
5.
break out the reserves
Yeah.
by
That's then it gives it a feel which one is driving the game.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
I'm impressed that you guys nailed sales tax.
Yeah. It's a guesstimate. One thing we did have in the cash and designated reserves were the little arrow that talked about the COVID money. Is that still valuable? Looking in the 21, 22, I think we just had that.
I think so. I think
it
it's a
yeah.
lift we need to
Okay.
carry for, the next 6 years until it rolls off the end.
Great. Okay. And then, my other question was, are you more interested as board in budget to actual or actual year over year? Like Q1 25 actual to Q1 26 actual versus budget, both? So this report will get a little bit longer, so I'll do a discussion about year over year actuals. Okay, I think both are valuable. The budget's our best guess when we do it, and sometimes those move around. I think actual tells a different story and also a valuable story. Okay.
Agreed.
Okay. Any other comments or questions, suggestions?
Anyone online? Nope.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Quarter 1 performance report. Tim.
Yep, that's my fault. I asked Dave to go to the Housing and Transit Conference in Seattle, so he's not here.
Never mind.
So Mary's kindly agreed to step in and to answer any questions you may have. Couple things that I wanted to highlight the accomplishments. One is in partnership with Smart Trips that pretty much every 7th grader in Whatcom County got a how to ride bus training, which has been historically a very good way of teaching folks how to ride. And the derivative effect of that has been we've heard anecdotal stories of parents telling us that their kids are saying, hey, why don't we take the bus? And using them to get around on that, which has led to the bus being an adventure for the family and causing others to now think about riding. So that's always a great investment. Also, one of the other ones, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullet down, Been working on our our group, continuous of operations, plan. And, the payroll group has been working on making sure that it's paying people, it's got top priority. Disasters. So just wanted to highlight a couple things. Off of that, and then on the performance data, various groups. Any questions on that?
No, I just wanted to say that I've heard from seventh grade teachers who have been super positive and find it to be just really valuable to their classrooms.
Thank you. We'll pass that on to our partners at Smart Trips. Thank you. Yeah, so if you have any questions, you can let me know. I think just the two things I was going to say is that paratransit continues to increase and rideshare and fixed route is really no change. If we look at quarter one of last year.
Right? Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Yeah, of course. All right, other business? Announcements?
One thing from my perspective, just as a reminder, June 4th is the next board workshop. So you and they all donating a morning to us. So thank you. Appreciate it. Those roll around quick.
All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.